My name is Margaret Doyle. Everyone calls me Meg, and I'm 34 years old. 5 years ago, my twin sister stood up in the middle of my wedding and told 200 guests I didn't deserve to be happy. Last week, she sat beside our father's hospital bed and finally told me why. But before I get to that room, and before I get to what she confessed with machines beeping around her, I need you to understand what she took from me on the worst day of my life. Welcome to the channel. If you're new here, where the quiet ones finally get to speak. If you've ever had a sibling who made your victory their tragedy, stay with me. The wedding was in Savannah, Georgia, in a courtyard behind an old restored inn. My mother had rented for more money than I made in 3 months. I was marrying Nathan Cole, a man who looked at me like I was the answer to a question he'd been asking his whole life. My sister, Diane, my twin, born 9 minutes after me, and never once letting me forget she considered that a technicality, was my maid of honor. She stood at the microphone in her sage green dress, tapped the glass, and smiled the smile I'd known since we were 4 years old, sharing a crib. Then she said, "I love my sister, but someone in this family needs to finally tell the truth." The courtyard went silent the way a room does right before a car crash. "Meg," she said, looking straight at me, "doesn't get to marry into happiness she didn't earn. Not after what she did to this family." I didn't know what she meant. I still remember standing there in white, my bouquet shaking in my hands, 200 faces turning toward me, like I was on trial for a crime I'd never been told about. My father stood up first, not to defend me. He walked straight to Diane, took the microphone gently from her hand, and said 4 words I have never forgotten. "Not today, Diane, please. Not, that's enough. Not, you're lying, please." Nathan married me anyway that day, in front of a courtyard full of people who now looked at me like I was hiding something. Diane left before the cake was cut. My father never explained what she meant. Not that night, not in 5 years, until last Tuesday, when the hospital called to say his heart was failing. And I walked into that room to find Diane already there, holding his hand, whispering something that made him weep. She looked up at me, and for the first time in 5 years, she didn't look angry. She looked afraid. "Meg," she said, "sit down. It's time you knew what Dad and I did to you." I didn't move. I stood in that hospital doorway with my coat still on, staring at my twin sister's face, waiting for the punchline that never came. "Sit down," Diane said again, softer this time. And for a woman who once destroyed my wedding in front of 200 people, she looked smaller than I'd ever seen her. My father's monitor beeped steady and slow beside him, his eyes closed, his hands still in hers. I didn't sit. 5 years, Diane. 5 years I've wondered what I supposedly did to this family. You don't get to hand it to me now, in a hospital room, like it's a favor. "It's not a favor," she said. "It's the truth. And I should have told you the day after the wedding, not 5 years later." My father's eyes opened then, slowly, like they weighed something. He looked at me first, then at Diane, and something passed between them. Some old, tired agreement. "Margaret," he said. He only ever used my full name when things were serious. "Your sister isn't lying, but she's not telling it right either." I pulled the chair from the corner of the room and finally sat, because my legs had stopped being reliable. "When you were 26, Diane started, "before you even met Nathan, there was money missing from Dad's business account, almost $60,000. Dad found out 2 days before your engagement dinner." I felt my stomach drop. I remembered that dinner. I remembered how quiet my father had been, how he'd barely eaten. "And he thought it was me," I said slowly. "He knew it wasn't you," Diane said, and her voice cracked on the word "knew," because I told him who took it. I told him everything, Meg. And then I begged him never to tell you the truth of what I did next. My father's hand tightened around hers, and for the first time, I saw the shame on his face, aimed not at me, but at himself. Diane, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. What did you do? The machines kept beeping. My father closed his eyes again, like he couldn't watch this part. And Diane, my twin sister, the woman who ruined my wedding day, rather than let this secret out, finally looked at me and said the sentence that would unravel everything. I thought I knew about my own family. I let him blame you instead of me, and I've been paying someone to keep it quiet ever since. For a moment, I couldn't make my mouth work. Paying someone, I repeated. Paying who? Quiet about what? Diane wiped her face with the back of her hand, the way she used to when we were kids, and got caught doing something we couldn't undo. There was a bookkeeper, old Mr. Halverson, at Dad's shop. He's the one who noticed the missing money first, before Dad even opened the account statements. He came to me because he trusted me more than he trusted you, because I was the one always in the office, always helping with the books. You were already halfway out the door with Nathan by then, building your own life. So you told him it was me. No, she snapped, and for the first time there was real anguish in it, not performance. I told Mr. Halverson the truth, that it was me, that I'd taken it to cover a debt I was too ashamed to explain. And he said he wouldn't say anything. For a price, $500 a month, every month for 5 years. Or he'd go straight to Dad and to the whole town. My father made a sound low in his throat, somewhere between a groan and a sob. I found out anyway, he said, eyes still closed. 3 years in, found the withdrawals in her account. But by then, Meg, you'd already spent 1.5 years thinking I doubted you. I saw how that ate at you before your wedding. I saw it in your face at that engagement dinner. And I told myself I'd fix it after the wedding, quietly, without making a scene. But there was a scene, I said. Diane made sure of that. Diane flinched like I'd struck her. I panicked. I thought if I confessed everything myself, in front of everyone, before Dad could tell you first in private, it would look like I was protecting you. I don't even know what I was thinking. I was drowning, Meg. I said it wrong. I said it so wrong. I sat there, 5 years of hurt rearranging itself into something almost unrecognizable. Not innocence exactly, but a shape I hadn't been allowed to see. You let me spend my wedding day, I said slowly, and every day since, being the woman this family quietly suspected of stealing from her own father, while you sat across from me at every holiday, every birthday, smiling, knowing the whole time. Diane didn't answer. My father finally opened his eyes, and what he said next made the room go colder than the machines around him ever could. There's one more thing you don't know, Margaret, about who Mr. Halverson really was to this family, and why your sister was so afraid of him finding out the truth about you. I turned to my father, my chest tight. What do you mean, who he really was? He gestured weakly for the water on his tray, and I poured it for him without thinking, my hands moving out of old habit, even as my mind was still reeling. He drank, then set the cup down with a shaking hand. Walter Halverson wasn't just my bookkeeper, he said. He was your mother's brother, your uncle, the one who disappeared from our lives before you girls were even 5 years old. I stared at him. I had no memory of an uncle. My mother had died when Diane and I were 7, and she'd rarely spoken about her side of the family. Just a vague, closed-off sadness whenever it came up. He came back into my life 10 years ago, my father continued, asking for work. I gave him a job out of guilt, out of missing your mother, out of not wanting to turn away her blood. I never told either of you who he was. I thought it would only open old wounds. Diane's voice was hollow. I didn't know either, not until the day I confessed to him about the money. He told me then, told me he was my uncle, and that family doesn't report family, but family also doesn't forget what it's owed. That's when the payments started. He wasn't blackmailing you for money he needed, I said slowly, understanding arriving like cold water. He was punishing this family for whatever happened between him and Mom. My father's eyes filled. Your mother cut him off after he gambled. away her half of her own parents' inheritance. He never forgave her. And when she died, he never forgave any of us for burying her without a word to him. So he used Diane, I said. He used her guilt to bleed this family for 5 years. And let me carry the blame in silence the whole time. Meg, Diane whispered, there's something else. Something I only found out 2 weeks ago, right before Dad's heart attack. It's why I finally came to see him. It's why I'm finally telling you all of this now, instead of taking it to my grave like I planned to. My father turned his face away from both of us, toward the window, like he couldn't bear to watch what came next. Walter didn't just take the money and disappear this time, Diane said. He's back in Savannah, and 2 nights ago he called me. He wants triple what I've already paid him, or he says he's not just going to the town anymore. She swallowed hard. He says he's going straight to Nathan. Nathan? I said the name like it belonged to someone else's life. What does Nathan have to do with any of this? Diane wouldn't look at me. She looked at our father instead, and something passed between them again. That same old current of guilt I was only just learning to read. Tell her, my father said quietly. You've come this far, Diane. Finish it. Diane pressed her palms against her eyes for a moment before she spoke. 2 years ago, when Nathan's construction company was struggling, before the county contract came through, before everything turned around for you two, he came to Dad for a loan, a private one, off the books, so it wouldn't show up anywhere and hurt his standing with the bank. My heart started pounding. Nathan had never mentioned this. Not once, in 5 years of marriage. Dad gave him $40,000, Diane continued. And Walter did the books that year too. He saw the withdrawal. He saw the loan agreement Nathan signed, promising repayment with interest. Quiet, private, family only. So he has proof, I said slowly. Proof that my husband was drowning financially right before our wedding. Proof he doesn't want made public. It's not just that the loan existed, Meg. Diane's voice dropped even lower. Walter kept copies of everything. Bank records, the signed agreement, even old texts between Nathan and Dad about hiding it from you. He told me if I don't pay him what he's asking, he's going to send it all to Nathan's business partners. Make it look like fraud. Like Nathan hid a hidden debt from the company, from the county contract reviewers, from you. I felt the room tilt. Nathan would lose everything. The company, the county contract, maybe even his freedom. If Walter frames it the way he's threatening to, my father said grimly, that man has spent 10 years learning exactly how to hurt this family without breaking a single law himself. I stood up so fast, the chair scraped hard against the floor. 5 years of silence. A wedding day I still couldn't think about without flinching. A secret debt my own husband had never told me. And now a man I'd never met, holding all our lives in a folder somewhere, waiting to burn them down. When does he want the money? I asked. Diane looked at me, and for the first time in 5 years, my sister and I were finally on the same side of something. Friday, she said. He wants it by Friday, or he sends everything to Nathan's biggest client, the county commissioner himself. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my car outside the hospital for 20 minutes before I could bring myself to drive home, running numbers in my head I didn't have, trying to decide how much of this to tell. Nathan before Friday arrived and decided it for me. But I never got the chance to choose. I walked into our kitchen at 11 that night to find Nathan already sitting at the table, his laptop open, his face gray in the blue light of the screen. He looked up at me, the way you look at someone when you've been caught, not surprised, just resigned. I got an email tonight, he said quietly, from a man named Walter Halverson. My stomach dropped through the floor. He sent me everything, Meg, the loan, the messages between me and your dad. He says, if I don't personally deliver $80,000 by Friday, he sends copies to Commissioner Reyes and the County Review Board. Nathan rubbed his face with both hands. The contract renewal vote is Monday, If this hits before then, we don't just lose the contract. We lose the company. 15 employees, Meg. Their families. I sat down across from him, my legs unsteady. You should have told me 5 years ago when Dad gave you that loan. You should have told me. I know, he said, and his voice broke on it in a way I'd never heard before. Not even at our wedding. Not even when his mother passed. I was ashamed, Meg. You married a man who was drowning, and I couldn't stand for you to know it. I told myself I'd pay your father back, and it would just disappear. I never imagined someone would still be sitting on it 5 years later, waiting for the exact right moment to use it. He's not just some stranger, Nathan. He's my uncle, my mother's brother, and he's been bleeding Diane dry for 5 years to keep quiet about something that was never even her secret to carry. Nathan's head came up sharply. Your uncle? I nodded slowly and told him everything. The wedding, the missing money, Diane's confession, the years of silent payments, all of it pouring out of me in the kitchen at midnight, while the clock over the stove ticked toward Friday. When I finished, Nathan was quiet for a long moment. Then he closed his laptop, stood, and walked to the drawer by the sink, where we kept old documents we never looked at. He pulled out a manila folder I'd never seen before. Meg, he said, I need to show you something I found 6 months ago when I was going through your father's old business records for the loan. Paperwork, something about Walter Halverson that I don't think even your father knows. He slid the folder across the table, and I opened it with hands that weren't quite steady. Inside were old bank statements, older than I'd expected, going back almost 12 years. Nathan pointed to a series of transfers, small ones at first, then growing larger, all routed through an account under a name I didn't recognize. W. Hale Consulting. It took me weeks to trace it, Nathan said. But W. Hale Consulting is Walter Halverson. He set it up under a variation of his name 2 years before your mother died. And Meg, he wasn't just bookkeeping for your father starting 10 years ago. He'd been quietly billing your father's business for consulting fees years before that, while your mother was still alive. Small amounts she never noticed, skimmed off vendor payments. He was stealing from this family while my mother was still alive, I said slowly. That's why she cut him off. Not the gambling story Dad told us. Or not only that. There's more. Nathan turned to the last page. A single letter, handwritten, dated 3 weeks before my mother's death. I found this tucked behind the statements. It's from your mother, addressed to your father. I read it twice before the words settled into meaning. My mother had discovered Walter's theft herself. Years before anyone else, she'd confronted him. And in the letter, she begged my father to keep it from us, from Diane and me, because, in her words, he is still my brother, and the girls don't need to grow up believing family can do this to family. She'd been protecting us from exactly this, and in doing so, she'd left the door open for it to happen anyway. A decade later, aimed at her own daughters. So he's been doing this for over 15 years, I whispered. First to Mom, then to Dad's business, then to Diane, and now to us. Nathan nodded grimly. Meg, this isn't blackmail from a stranger. This is a pattern, and patterns leave trails a court can follow. If we're willing to stop protecting him the way your mother did. I looked at the letter in my hands, at my mother's careful handwriting, at 15 years of silence that had cost this family more than any of us had ever been told. Friday isn't a deadline anymore, I said, standing up, something steady and cold settling into my chest for the first time since that hospital room. It's an opportunity. Call Diane. Call Commissioner Reyes's office first thing tomorrow. And Nathan, find me a lawyer who handles financial fraud tonight, because Walter Halverson has no idea what's about to walk through his door on Friday. Friday came fast. I sat between Nathan and Diane in a small conference room, above a law office on Bull Street, watching a folder thicker than the one Walter had used to threaten us for years get laid out on the table by an attorney named Priya Raman, who specialized in exactly this kind of quiet, decade-long theft. Walter arrived at noon, expecting a payoff. He wore a linen suit too crisp for a man who'd spent 15 years stealing from grieving families, and he smiled when he saw the three of us sitting there together, like our unity was just one more thing for him to enjoy breaking. "I see we're all here," he said, settling into his chair. "Good, let's talk numbers." "We already did," I said, sliding my mother's letter across the table. 15 years ago, I watched the smile leave his face as he read it, as he understood what sat in the folder beside it. The W. Hale consulting statements, the vendor skimming, the pattern Nathan had traced back through a decade of quiet theft, notarized and documented, and no longer just a family secret managed at a kitchen table. "This isn't a negotiation, Mr. Halverson," Priya said calmly. "This is a choice. Return every dollar my clients can document. Sign a formal agreement to never contact this family again, or we file with the district attorney this afternoon, and the county commissioner's office receives a very different email than the one you sent, Nathan, one from a licensed attorney, about a documented pattern of extortion and theft." Walter's composure cracked. For the first time in 5 years of holding this family hostage, he tried threats, then excuses, then something almost like an apology, aimed at no one in particular. It didn't matter. By the end of that hour, he'd signed everything Priya put in front of him. He never contacted any of us again. The county contract renewed the following Monday. My father came home from the hospital 2 weeks later, weaker but steady, and the first thing he did was sit Diane and me down at his kitchen table and finally say the words neither of us had heard in 5 years. "I should have told you both the truth the day it happened, not let it fester into a wedding day neither of you can look back on without pain. I'm sorry. Diane and I didn't become the sisters we were before that garden in Savannah. Too much silence had grown between us for that. But we became something else. Honest with each other, finally, in a way we'd never managed even as children sharing a crib. 6 months later, Nathan and I renewed our vows in that same courtyard. Just the 4 of us, and a justice of the peace. No microphone, no secrets left to confess. Sometimes the truth doesn't arrive gently. Sometimes it costs you a wedding day, a decade of silence, and a man willing to burn your family down for money. But when it finally comes, it clears out everything false in its way. And what's left, if you're lucky, is something worth rebuilding.